Straight Talk Live.
Off. Should we get started?
Let's go. Let's crack on. It's a beautiful day in London.
It's also a beautiful day here in San Diego.
They buy things to impress people that they don't even like.
You do have to change the culture. The culture in the organization is the most important.
It's as if reality is splintering into multiple shards.
Welcome to Straight Talk Live. I'm one of your co-hosts, Rick Snyder. I'm the CEO of Invisible Edge and the author of Decisive Intuition, and one of the proud co-founders of this amazing show that's a not-for-profit where we explore the realms of human, digital, and social transformation. And once again, it was really birthed in this concept right when COVID hit in early March of 2020. Af and I were not impressed by the conversations that were happening around the world and how underprepared we were in so many sectors of our lives and the important conversations that needed to be happening. So that's why we created this platform to invite amazing experts around the world to discuss the most pertinent problems and issues that we're facing today. So before I go any further, I want to introduce our amazing co-host. You all know him and love him very much, Af Malhotra. Af, take it away.
Thank you very much, Rick. It's nice to feel loved. So I appreciate that. we have a terrific kick-ass episode today with a very special guest, and we'll talk more about him shortly. So I'm, of course, the co-creator of this wonderful not-for-profit and involved in a whole bunch of philanthropic work myself, and also a tech founder, a tech entrepreneur with one of my recent ventures, Growth Enabler. Straight Talk Live has had a profound effect on our lives over the last 17 months. As you all know, it continues to reshape the way we think about the strategies of life, the way we think about digital, the way we think about human, the aspects of personal development and leadership, and the way we think about the climate and the environment. We tend to call that human, digital, and social. And today's guest is going to probably encompass all aspects of that to a large extent, and is going to open our minds to some of the things that we often think but don't really discuss in real time. So I'm going to throw kick the football over to you, Rick, and off you go. I know the screen is a little bit slow. If I'm, I don't know if the Zoom call today is a little bit odd, but I'm in slow motion mode. So I'll try and sign back in if it's my issue. If it's a Zoom issue, then let me know. But I'm going to throw the ball over.
Yeah, thank you, Af. And I think we probably have that same echo problem, so we'll just take turns speaking here. So I want to welcome our amazing guest, Peter Kadens, to our show today. And Peter is chairman at the Kadens Family Foundation. He's also the founder and the former CEO of Green Thumb Industries. He's been very passionate and interested in the cannabis realm and sector. He's been a board director of marijuana policy and cannabis trade. He's also a restaurant owner. He's an incredible entrepreneur, speaker, inspirer, and very authentic human being. You're about to see that in a moment here. And also very passionate about social justice and how to give back to communities in a very real, practical way, and what that looks like, and how to use your privilege and how to use your position and power for helping others. And so that's really the core of what we're going to get to today. So first of all, Pete, welcome to Straight Talk Live.
Thank you so much, Rick and Af, for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
So Pete, you have such a fascinating background. Obviously, cannabis is such an intriguing sector and how it's gained legality in the States and many other places around the world. And it's such a hot topic around all the medicinal properties and textile, abilities and all the things that can be harvested from this hemp plant. And I'm just curious, how did you get involved in that world? How did that start for you?
Well, I've always had a concern about the damage done by the war on drugs. I was the chairman of the board of the largest homeless aid agency here in Chicago for 12 years. And I would say the vast majority of the people I work with and the families were part of this tsunami of, poverty that was caused by, mostly drug-related arrests and incarceration. Mm-hmm. But they were all good people. They were all smart and capable. They all had certain talents. And effectively, they were serving a life sentence, even though their sentence may have only been 2 or 3 years in jail. Because of that gap on their resume and that felony, employers weren't able to or willing to intervene and employ them, and so they were paying basically a life sentence, and they were homeless. I just didn't feel that was right. That really concerned me. So I always had this bias around the damage done by the war on drugs. And then in 2013, a friend of mine called me. He's now the CEO of Green Thumb Industries, named Ben Kovler. He asked me what I thought about marijuana. I told him, of course, I loved it. And he said, no, not the plant, the business. I said, I don't really know anything about the business. But I had been running a large company at the time in the solar energy space, and he got me intrigued. He actually said one thing to me, and I'll turn it back over to you, which was pretty interesting. He said, if you can brand something and charge a premium, something as mundane and benign and abundant as this, water, slap a label on it and charge a $4 premium. Imagine what you could do, the branding possibilities with something that's got real therapeutic application and thousands of strains or cultivars or permutations. And so that really caught my attention from a business perspective. And then shortly thereafter, I joined Ben.
Got it. And so there's the personal interest, but then really seeing the business opportunities. But also, it sounds like there's that social thread that was always there, where you saw people being unfairly incarcerated or treated in a certain way, and you saw a way that you could help change that. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, the people who have spastic disorders like MS or Parkinson's or AIDS or certain cancers or a whole suite of other things are using this plant, and frankly, it's helping them in many ways, and without the dangerous side effects of some of these opiates and other narcotics. And yet people are going to jail for the same medicinal plant. By the way, cannabis is the oldest known form of medicine. Through archaeological digs that date back 13,000 years in the Far East, we know that, our ancestors, many generations back, were using cannabis as a medicine even then. And so to incarcerate people for the very same plant that was helping AIDS patients put weight back on, or MS patients or Parkinson's patients, alleviate their spastic issues, didn't make sense to me, and didn't seem fair. So I decided I was going to be a cause warrior, and this was my cause. And it also, again, it intersected well with my entrepreneurial spirit. So it was a perfect time and moment to take risks. Now, I will say, there was a lot of pioneers in the space that got in much earlier than I did, 2007, 2008, 2009. And what we saw with them? We saw that those people, for the most part, were not prepared to scale a business. And that, from a business mind, was an opportunity for me. I saw these people that were doing very well in California and Colorado, but they didn't really understand the business basics. So to me, there was also an opening where the competition at the time was weak. It's much, much better now.
Yeah.
So Pete, if I may, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Cool. I just wanted to make sure there's no lag. So when we spoke a few weeks back, it was a fantastic conversation. Quite a few things captured my attention and have got me thinking about the world in a slightly different way. And being really open with you, one of the most important things that you shared, and by the way, that was the first time we ever met and introduced through someone we both know really well, we all know really well. And you said something to me that has stayed with me. In fact, I've probably repeated it a few times to quite a few people. And the sentiment around what you said was broken down in the following ways. You talked about, which I'd love you to unpack now for the audience. The first part of it was your journey and your personal background. You come from a humble background. You worked hard. You've obviously built a lot of wealth for yourself, financial wealth, but also mental wealth, family wealth, spiritual wealth over time as well, different types of wealth. You have experienced a bit of an awakening where you had a sense of guilt about what you have done in the past, but also an important sense of responsibility that you are now undertaking in this next phase of your life. which I'd like you to unpack as part of your story and your journey, which is to do with enabling others to be more complete, more empowered, and not the trite sort of bullshit way of, saying, well, I'm really rich and wealthy now, so let me try and help those who are poor. And we'll talk more about the fallacy of that, because I know you have something to say, and we certainly have the questions for you around that as well. We'll come to that later. But please start with a little bit about your journey, because it's very important for people to understand you. They don't really know you. So who are you?
Yeah, great. So I'm a middle-class kid from Toledo, Ohio. My father was a teacher, a professor at a kind of a third-tier university, the University of Toledo in Ohio. My mother was a 16-year elected official, elected for 4 terms. So my parents were both civil servants, effectively. And while they didn't make a lot of money, they were well-educated. And we lived in a middle-class white community with a very high-quality public school. And I had while my parents weren't rich, and they didn't have a bunch of money I was going to inherit or money that it was going to help me start a business one day, they gave me the gift of opportunity. They gave me the gift of knowledge. They gave me the gift of direction, pointing me in the right direction. When I was 8 years old, I got an amazing gift. And I always thank my parents are in their mid 80s now. And I always thank them for this gift, which was my dad had a sabbatical. And we went to 20 plus countries over the course of a year. My parents pulled me out of second grade. And my dad was studying economic development in development countries. So I was in Red China. I was in Calcutta. I was in the Klong Canals in Bangkok. I mean, I was in, at the time, some very not contemporary places. Now, these places have been contemporized over the years, but I can promise you that in 1985, when I was floating down the Klong Canals in Bangkok, it was not contemporary. It was anything but. It was utter squalor. And for a little kid from a middle-class community in Ohio to see that, to open up my aperture and my lens to suffering and poverty. And frankly, it was interesting because these kids were in utter poverty. These Thai kids who were swimming in the canals that I was floating down in a canoe, they just didn't know it. I knew it. It was the first time I became aware of what poverty really was. And so that started my journey and my anthropological fascination with poverty. And the notion that I acquired this gift of the question why, which is to say, if you see someone impoverished, like I always say, I see a homeless man on a street in freezing cold in Chicago. It's easy to give him $1. I do that as much as I can. I know a lot of people do. It's much harder, especially in your busy day with your phones and all of your other connectivity, to walk by after giving him $1 and ask yourself, why is that person on the freezing concrete and why am I here? And that deep kind of search for that anthropological bifurcation of humanity, like, why is he there and why am I here, has been a real soul searching effort for me for the rest of my life. And that really guides my entire journey. So this has been an important part of my journey. And Af, I think one of the things you're getting to, and then I'll get off my soapbox here, is part of my journey coming where I came from and then becoming successful and becoming wealthy. I always asked myself, again, why were these people here and why was I there? And I think the conclusion I have come to years later and having created real wealth, for myself and my family, is I won in life because other people lost. And I hate to make it seem so unbalanced, like, why can't I win and other people win too? But that's just not reality. I won in life because other people lost. In other words, if all of those kids of the underserved Black schools in downtown Toledo would have the same family infrastructure and support and access that I had, would I have gotten into the colleges and universities I got into? Probably not, to be honest with you. But that's not what transpired. And so because they were treated inequitably and I got certain preferences and advantages, I won. And that guides my philanthropy today, because I do have a deep sense of guilt about that.
Let's talk more about that for a second. So you built a bunch of businesses. You executed your role as a leader in whatever capacity, and you gained some rewards on the back of it. Let's call them financial rewards for now. That gave you a sense of comfort, has given you a sense of comfort in life, maybe for your generation or a few generations down the line. And that's wonderful, it's remarkable. There are many people in the world like that. But a lot of those people who we've seen in different parts of the world, I mean, I live in London, the UK. You know, you're in one part of the States in Chicago. Rick's in California, in fact, in San Diego specifically. And our guests are all from all over the world, right? And of course, the audience listening in from different channels. It's not common practice for someone who's made it to authentically have a sense of guilt and responsibility. That's what you used with me when you spoke to me and you said, I'm not giving anyone a gift here, Af, so don't think I'm just trying to be generous. It's my duty and my responsibility to do this. So tell us a little bit about, I get your background, and that must have a massive role to play in, as you call it, your aperture, your way of thinking, your psyche. Absolutely, without question. And it makes me think as a parent, and I always say this, I've got to send my kids when they're at the right age somewhere in the world to experience that, because otherwise they're going to think everything is about abundance, and that causes a different set of problems as we see in the West today, right? And we're almost trying to go back to say, hey, we've got to balance ourselves off. So it's great you've had that. But what else has triggered that in you? I mean, is it just that where, you know, the fact that you were exposed to people who didn't have what you had? What is it? I mean,
it's such bullshit, frankly, that here I am, this rich, wealthy white guy who created all this wealth on the backs of black and brown people who did the same thing I did, maybe in a slightly less sophisticated way. But they did the same thing I did out of their basements and garages for generations before me. And they ended up incarcerated and with lives destroyed. And I ended up in this beautiful home living on the lake with millions of dollars. Go figure. How can I rationalize that? How can I sleep well at night knowing that that's the case? That I did what I did on the backs of black and brown people, and they suffered. And so we use that word reparation. People get uncomfortable with that word. And I'm not going to use it here other than to say, I'm trying to repair the damage done with the knowledge of knowing that if it weren't for them and the foundation they created for me to be, you know, I came along just as the stigma started to become erased on cannabis, just as the legalization wave started here in the US. And I just timed it perfectly. And I always say to people too, like, I even have an older brother who doesn't like when I say this. You know, like, if I talk to an entrepreneur and I say, tell me the 2 or 3 reasons why you're so successful. And if they don't throw out the word luck in one of those 2 or 3 reasons, I just immediately say, you're a bullshit artist. You're full of hubris. How can you say that luck doesn't play a role? I mean, look, there's lots of entrepreneurs that work hard. There's lots of entrepreneurs that have great ideas and great visions. There's lots of entrepreneurs, and some of them are down in the South Side of Chicago and they're living in poverty. They work tirelessly, but they don't make it to where I've made it. And so I have to believe, and it would be excessive hubris if I didn't believe this, that I experienced extraordinarily good fortune in my life. And in order to pay that back, my responsibility is to pay that back so that other people have a better chance to try and find that good fortune that I have found. That's the way I pay. You know, as we talked last time, people always talk about this notion of pay it forward. I'm a bigger believer in the notion of pay it backward. What are the things in the communities and the people in my life that gave me the leg up that others didn't have? And now I got to pay it backward so that others have that same chance. That's the way I view the world.
Could you share, Pete, some of the ways that you do that? So what are some of the actual ways that you are paying it back? What does that look like in communities? I'd love to hear some of those pieces.
Yeah. So when I was a CEO of Green Thumb Industries, which is now, by the way, a $7 billion market cap business. I mean, it's the second largest cannabis company in the world. And my partners and my team there have done such an incredible job of carrying that torch since I left and left the board in 2019. But we did a lot of things at Green Thumb Industries where we would, I had this mandate where we would say, all right, if we have a big cultivation facility, 50 to 100 jobs or more, we're going to locate that facility in a city that has experienced the damage of the war on drugs. So I don't want to go into some wealthy, mostly white city, that is just taking advantage of this novel legalization effort. I want to go in a city that's got more than 20% below the poverty line, more than 30% minority density, and is experiencing some of the highest unemployment in the state. Those are the same people whose lives were kind of misaligned and recreated under this fallacy of the war on drugs. Those are the same people we want to try and employ. So we also did hosted expungement fairs to help people expunge their criminal histories, to help them get to the point where they can apply for jobs with us. That's a lot of what I did. I said, as chairman of the board and of the largest homeless aid agency in Chicago for many years. I've served on many boards in the space. But I think probably most notably is I have now come to the conclusion that we cannot solve multi-dimensional, intractable issues with one-dimensional solutions. And I think as a society, we try and do that a lot. We have a gun violence issue here in Chicago, and so someone throws out the notion that we'll have $1 million reward for someone who turns in, X number of guns. That's a one-dimensional solution for a multi-dimensional issue. So I'm focused on now is that intersection between poverty and education. I believe it's that nexus that recreates our cities and changes societies forever. And so a good example, Rick, of what I did is I went back to my hometown, which is a very underserved hometown. Only about 17% of the citizens in Toledo, Ohio have four-year college degrees. So it's a very undereducated community, frankly. But I went to this school that was 4 miles down the road from where I grew up, my good quality white middle-class school. I went to an all-black high school, all underserved, all below the poverty line. And on January 29th of 2020, so right before the pandemic, I told them that I was all the senior class, and now we've done it for another class as well, that I was going to pay for their tuition, room and board, books and fees, lock, stock, and barrel for them to go to college or trade school or 2 year. I didn't want to mainstream kids into going to a college if it wasn't right for them. So any accredited trade or certification program or 4-year or 2-year school they could go to totally for free. In addition, because poverty is, I go back to that one-dimensional versus multi-dimensional issue, because poverty is a multi-generational issue, you don't solve poverty with one-generational solutions. So I took it a step further. And I said, not only am I going to pay, Mr. Senior, Mr. Big Shot, big man on campus senior, Miss Big Shot on campus, senior girl, not only am I going to pay for your college, I'm going to pay for your parent or legal guardian to go to college as well. So 2 generations, because I believe that's how we solve or start to solve this issue. So that's how I really started to focus on this. And that type of approach is really what I'm spending a lot of my foundation dollars on going forward.
Wow. That's remarkable. Yeah, I can imagine. What was the reception like when you went to the school and they heard probably your story? I'm sure you did a presentation of some sort. And what was the reception like?
My wife reminds me that I have to set aside my wedding day and the birth of my 3 children. So I'm going to set those things aside. Okay. But I would say, other than those 3 seminal moments in my life, this was the best day of my life. The most fulfilling day of my life. It gives me goosebumps still right now. I mean, and it brings me to tears. That euphoria in that room, the notion, and these kids and these families came up to me afterwards and they said this to me. The notion that a white man with riches believed in Black children in the urban corridors in a beaten up city like Toledo, Ohio. Just that notion, set aside the financial piece. The notion that I believed in them and wanted to invest in them changed their paradigm, changed their cultural narrative, changed everything for them. And so it was true euphoria like I've never experienced in my life. It was, again, outside of those 3 or 4 major family moments, the happiest moment of my life, because it was the moment where I realized, so I sold the company to a Fortune 500 company. I took a company public. I achieved all this stuff from a career and compensatory perspective. But I didn't feel like I had reached the mountaintop until that day, January 29th of 2020. That was the moment when I knew that my success was more than just success. It had now translated to significance. So for me, it was euphoric. And for them, they freaked out. It was awesome. And it's all on video, by the way. If you go to CBS News, there's a bunch of videos on it.
That's amazing.
What about this concept of, I think you talked about, you give more, surprise, surprise, you give more and you start getting more. And guessing more means all sorts of guessing, all sorts of gain, fulfillment, contentment, emotions. I can see that you're emotional right now when you're describing that moment. In fact, I was getting some goosebumps as I'm a visual kind of person, and so is Rick. We start visualizing things where we're not there, but we're imagining we're there, superimposing ourselves on that scene at that time. And what an amazing feeling. And it makes you question everything, right? It makes you start sort of, all the noise gets cleared and you start to realize actually these simple things in life can be so empowering, so complete, make you feel so, in touch with your role on this planet, because we seek all sorts of things to try and do that, religion, faith, spiritual guru, blah, 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 the list goes on. That is a very powerful story. Let me touch on a dark side of this, which is, unfortunately, and these are your words, I'm paraphrasing, not everyone around you, maybe your proximity, maybe metaphorically speaking, does what you're doing. I don't quite understand why. And let me put something out there. Someone I know and respect quite well, he's an entrepreneur too, put up a post, put up a statement on Facebook. It's not misinformation, it's just his view. So put up a statement saying, Jeff Bezos spent X billion going to space for 11 minutes. I wonder what else he could have done with that money. We talked about the golf course. I'm not having a go at golfers because I have many friends and family members who are great golfers, but both you and I connect on that. Really, I'd rather spend my time doing something else. I think it's a great game, but it's not for me. Why doesn't everyone who is as accomplished financially get it? And talk us through, if you're comfortable, and you can be as straight talking as well. You can throw F-bombs if you really want, if you feel passionate about it, no problems. Say what the fuck you want, really. Make you feel comfortable. Let's just call a spade, as they say in the UK. Why aren't people around you doing the same as you, Pete?
Yeah, it's a important question. It's a question we all need to get to the bottom of. I don't have a silver bullet answer, but I have some hypotheses. My probably most dominant theory on this issue is very simple, and it makes sense. And I've been in that chair, so I can see why someone would feel this way or act this way. Martin Luther King, in his letter from Birmingham City Jail, talked about how people and groups with privilege have a long and sordid history of working very hard to protect their privilege.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
To me, whether consciously or subconsciously, that is why most white wealthy people, and I say white, and I mean it because I'm straight talking here, they're working to protect their privilege. They're working to protect their privilege for their kids. They're working to protect their privilege for the broader family. I'm not a believer in creating multi-generational wealth because I'm not trying to protect my kids' privilege. I think the reason I am here today is because I didn't have the type of privilege that many kids of wealth have. I had to work for everything. And I'm not one of those people who I bootstrapped it. No, I had a great support system. My parents got me to college and all the other stuff. I didn't have the hardcore situation many people have when they start with nothing. I had a good foundation. But, sometimes it's a disadvantage to be saddled with wealth. And I think Warren Buffett has talked about the fact that that's the worst gift he could give his kids, his money. And so I think all of us are so busy trying to protect our privilege. We want our kids to go to the best schools. And so if we lift someone else up from an inner city who's a different race, who could compete 1-for-1 with my kid at, some prestigious high school in the North Shore of Chicago, is my kid then going to get into Dartmouth? Maybe not. And so it's not that I'm racist overtly. It's just that I want better for my kid. And so because of that, I'm not going to help the kid down in the South Side of Chicago. Mm-hmm. That to me is the core issue. And it's an unspoken thing, but it's reality. This is the way we all act. Mm-hmm. And we have to understand what we have to do to solve this. We have a problem in this country now in that we can never come to a common set of understandings because we can't even agree to a common set of facts, right? And so if everyone would agree to this fact that most rich people work to protect their family's privilege, and if they at least understood that and could intuitively kind of grapple with that and kind of be aware of when those moments of protecting their privilege happened and try and address it a little bit, maybe the world would be a little bit more of a fair place. But I think that's the core issue here, Af, and it pains me to say that, but I see it in my neighbors, I see it in my friends, and sometimes, to be honest with you, I see it in myself.
Mm-hmm. You know, it reminds me, just in terms of philanthropy, it's just really clear to me, Pete, how I don't like to use the word pure, but you have a really just honest and earnest connection to what you're giving and to your audience you're serving and the people you're serving. It's just super clear. And I imagine as you look around, you see a lot of other philanthropists who, you know, there's a dark side of philanthropy where, you know, it's just about taxes. It's just about, you know, looking good for PR or feeling good from your ego and that kind of place. What are you noticing when you look out at the landscape, and do you ever bump into those colleagues or, you know, people who have attained as much or more than you? And do you ever have those awkward conversations, or what happens behind the scenes?
Yeah, I have those awkward conversations all the time. And I'm currently in the middle of a major fundraiser for an educational initiative I'm launching, and having these conversations right now. And, you know, what I'm having to do is I'm having to be a little bit of a chameleon in my messaging, you know, so I know pretty quickly who the people are who only care about their taxes. And I have a message for them too. And my message for them is, it's easy to blame the governor and say it's the governor's fault or the legislature's fault. Frankly, in the state of Illinois, you know, the financial harm done here that's causing our high taxes is, you know, decades in the making. So it's not the current governor's fault in any way, but he's the easy person to blame. The fact of the matter is a very simple formula. And so I educate these people if they don't know on the formula. The formula is this: if you want to know why Amazon didn't put their second headquarters here, if you want to know why Peloton didn't put their brand new 3 million square foot manufacturing facility here, if you want to know all this other stuff, why we're struggling from an economic development perspective here in Chicago, I'll tell you exactly why. It's because we're an underskilled and undereducated workforce. And so if what you care about is your tax rate, that's all you care about, that's fine. Ideologically, we don't agree. But if that's what you care about and you want to change that, you should start investing in the education of families in the South and West, disinvested sides of Chicago, because when they get more skilled and when they get more educated, you level the playing field, you create a wider base of taxpayers who can have, and then the rich people at the top pay less tax. That's just kind of how the formula works. Pretty simple. So what I've tried to do in these meetings, there are a lot of people. I'm a liberal, I'm a progressive guy. There's a lot of people I meet with who've become very wealthy and now they pay an abundance of taxes, as do I. But that's a core issue for them. And so I've learned as a fellow of the Aspen Institute, some of your prior folks you've interviewed, you know, I've learned how to curate a narrative and a message to people who don't ideologically agree with me. And I think in order for us to come to this common set of understandings, we have to speak to people who look at facts and look at things differently than we do. And so I don't disagree with people. I'm more of a yes and person than a yes but person these days. And frankly, I find like we get more done by hearing people, listening to their concerns, and being a chameleon. But yeah, it's frustrating. I mean, I don't agree with these greedy people on the way they see the world. And it pisses me off when I go to someone's house and they got this big, beautiful mansion and 37 cars in the basement dating back to 1942. And I pose the question, so what board are you on? What charities do you give to? I'm too busy right now. I'm not really engaged in charitable work. Really? I mean, are you fucking serious? Is that what you want to be known for when you die? You want to be known for your fucking car collection? I mean, I don't say it exactly in those terms, but I'm on Straight Talk Live, so I can say it. That gets under my skin. That agitates me, and I try and talk to people about it because I think it's important that people like me and like all of us who are philanthropically inclined, we should be calling out the people who are not.
Yeah.
Yes.
Fantastic. It's brilliant. Let's talk a little bit about you're getting us charged up. Let's talk a little bit about tomorrow, the future, and you know, you're starting this campaign, and let's specifically talk about this new fundraiser, because I found that really fascinating. Tell us more about what it is that you're doing now, and what's that sort of big difference that you want to make. How you're going to educate that as well.
Right. All right. So I'm not going to tell everybody the whole picture because the formal announcement isn't until early September. But I'm going to give an overview. And the overview is this: what I did in Toledo is helping about 300 families, and that's beautiful because, frankly, I started with 3 children and now I have 300, which is amazing. In fact, I just moved one of my students from from Toledo. He couldn't make it in school. Last year, he got COVID during his freshman year. And then his brother got shot, unfortunately, in a drug trade gone wrong. And lots was going on in his life. He couldn't get through school. And so I moved him here to the northern suburbs of Chicago. I got him an apartment. I got him a car, and he's coming to work for me. And I'm watching over him. So I really have inherited many of these children, which is awesome. But I decided what I did in Ohio with 300 people was just my appetizer. I'm 43 years old. I got lots of years to live. I got real capital. I got real intellect. There's real possibility. If I don't take what I learned there, and there is a lot of learnings there, by the way, and mistakes and foibles. If I don't take all of that and apply it to a much more scalable solution here in my home community, that would be a big mistake. I have a moral imperative to do that. So what I'm doing here in Chicago is I'm launching a much, much larger initiative. I'm not going to give the exact terms, but many, many, many more dollars than the dollars I'm raising and deploying in Toledo. I've hired a world-class CEO. I'm not going to say who that is yet, but someone that people on this podcast know, a very famous Black woman, an amazing leader. We've built a world-class board, and we are going to deploy enough capital so that roughly 70,000 families, Chicago families, are impacted by quality access to education, the same exact education that my children in the north suburban white rich communities would access. To me, that changes the cultural paradigm. And there's an analog here that I want to talk about really quickly, because I keep using the word cultural paradigm or cultural narrative. That's important. There's a program in Kalamazoo, Michigan, a city of about $80,000 called 80,000 people, called the Kalamazoo Promise. And I was talking to a woman there who was a teacher. She taught seniors in English and literature. And she said, Pete, 10 years ago, before we started funding college tuition for all the public school, high school graduates in Kalamazoo, if you graduate from a public high school in Kalamazoo, there are 3 of them, you can go to college for free. That's the deal in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And she said 10 years ago, before this started, in March of the senior year, I used to sit the classroom down and 25 seniors, and I used to say, so what are you going to do next year? And now today, I look at these kids and I say, so where are you going to college next year? And just the tweak of those 4 words from that one sentence 10 years ago to this new sentence today has had massive cascading and cultural impacts in that entire community. By the way, poverty in 2010 in Kalamazoo, Michigan, city of 90,000 people, 39% below the poverty line. Today, 21%. I mean, that just doesn't happen by accident, right? That happens because we're driving people into the city who want to take advantage of opportunities for free education, and they actually are taking advantage of it and coming back to this small city with a degree in tow, and they're reinventing this community. That's what we have the capacity to do in Chicago. That's what I'm working on and super excited. My organization is called HOPE, which stands for Helping Our Population Educate. And our tagline is higher education for every generation.
That's amazing. I want to ask you about this. I was a school-based therapist at one point in the worst neighborhood in San Francisco, which is known for the most violent crime and gangs and that kind of thing, called Bayview Hunters Point. And it was all Black and Samoan population. And I'm the white guy therapist trying to get their world and help them as best I can. And one of the things that really I didn't really realize until I was on the ground was the paradigm around people who've been in the projects for like 4 generations. And they didn't have any thought of anything different. They had no other conception that there could be a different future. They assumed, I'm going to have kids here and this is my life. And it was just amazing to me that was the mindset. And I didn't appreciate that until I was up close with that. And so one thing that I'm getting is how you're really helping change people's paradigms and their mindsets and what's possible in a real way. And one of my questions is, when you are helping people get access to schools, I'm just curious about, like, is the money more going towards, better schools and giving them access that way? Are you actually enhancing the education by helping with teacher training and different new resources in the classroom? Like, what are the ways that you can actually boost and enhance education?
Yeah. All of the above. Rick, it's such an important question. Just giving kids money to go to school is not even close to enough, especially first generation underserved kids. It's a wraparound system. They need trauma-informed education. They need mentorship. They need financial literacy. They need life skills training. They need college preparatory training, especially if they're first generation and parents can't educate them on what it's like to go to college. So we provide all of that in the run up to college as part of our offering. We partner with agencies, nonprofit agencies in Chicago and in Toledo, who've been doing this for generations. And they do great work. They're probably a little bit underfunded. They're smaller nonprofits, but they do great work. And we're funding those nonprofits to bring all those skills to these kids. So when they get on campus, look, it's a pretty damn daunting thing. When you walk onto a campus as a first generation Black man or woman, and everyone else is white, and everyone else's parents went to college, you immediately from day one feel well out of your comfort zone. So we have to prepare these kids for that. And then what we do is this. We say to the colleges and universities, we know you want our students. They all want urban, diverse, underserved students who have the capacity to get into these colleges and get educations. That's a badge of honor for these universities. But guess what? You don't get these kids fully paid for unless you pay your dues too, Mr. University, Mr. or Mrs. University President. And so we demand that our college or university or trade school partners have a retention program in place. Because you know what? It is not enough. We have this historical thing here in the US where it's like, we have these things called set-asides. We're like, we set aside licenses or contracts or opportunities for Black and brown people. And then we just like magically expect them to succeed because we give them something. That doesn't fucking work. It never has, and it never will. So we're not just going to send these kids to college as an optical illusion, as a mirage of sorts, and say, here, we paid for you. Good luck.
Exactly.
No, the school has to deploy a retention program. It has to be formalized. And your job is, Mr. University or Mrs. University President, get this kid to get a piece of paper at the end with his name on it. If you don't do that, you're not going to be our university partner for long, getting full boat tuition paid for. And we're very demanding and upfront on that piece. And so that's how we're doing it, Rick. We realize that it's way more than just money that's going to get these kids to persist through their education.
Just going back to that example, you got me thinking, when you talked about that scenario where you've got the young person, let's say the Black person who's come in and they're daunted by the other people in the college or the university who might be white, for example. Talk me through your view on those people. So here we're talking about the individual who needs the support and who will make waves at some point. Let's talk about the people and their attitudes on the other side. The community at large, because of course I'm the Black guy. I feel uncomfortable. You're the other chap on the other side. What's your attitude like? How's that changing? How am I helping you to change your mindset? Because you come with preconceived ideas, biases, unconscious bias, the whole shebang.
Yeah, no, Af, it's a good question. And truth be told, that is an issue. And I do think that there is a movement afoot. I think especially here in the US, post George Floyd, there is a movement afoot. Some of it's superficial and bullshit, to be honest with you, but some of it I think is genuine, to actually educate the white population on A, the lived experience of a Black or brown person in this community, B, the policing experience of a Black or brown person, what it's mean to be policed as a Black or brown person in the US, and the damage that some of the criminal justice system and policing efforts have done to these people and their psyches. So I think there's a slightly better understanding today than there was a year and a half ago, which is good. And I think that applies to, this younger generation, even the third generation wealthy white kids, I think have a slightly better cause orientation than you and I did growing up. So I think that's helpful. But to answer your question, it's a great point. And to date, we haven't put any formal plans in place to educate the ecosystem about how to welcome these Black and brown kids and how to dismiss those preconceived notions or biases about them. But that's an important element of this we need to consider. And so you just gave me a good idea and something to talk to my new CEO about. So thank you.
Yeah, no, pleasure. Yeah, because I think the two-way communication is extremely important because no matter how much you empower that individual, the social fabric needs to be responsive and conducive. Otherwise, they will sort of retreat mentally. And that causes a whole heap of other problems related to mental well-being and depression and stress, which is, thanks for giving me everything you did, but the society is not accepting my greatness. And so that is also disenchanting and disheartening for you because you did everything you could to that point. But I guess that's the next challenge. Hopefully with this new project you're running, that should be on the agenda as much as helping the person who needs that assistance.
Absolutely. I do have one thing that I forgot about that I'm doing. I do have one thing that I forgot about that I'm doing. Good thing.
Sorry, carry on. No, there was a delay. Carry on.
Yeah, good thing. That my high school in Ohio, my all white high end, high school. I've partnered 20 kids in that high school up with 20 kids from the underserved Black high school in Toledo that I'm providing scholarships for. And these kids now come together once a month as a community to talk about intractable issues in their community, to talk about their existence and their life, to talk about what life is like in their respective worlds. They've gone camping together. They've gone to movies together. And so I am starting to do that. I wasn't, necessarily thinking about that when you asked the question, but there is some movement afoot to bring these communities together so at least they can understand one another better. So I am doing a little bit of that, but not at scale. And so I need to work on that.
It looks like you're not coming through audio wise. So, I'll ask a question while Af is figuring out the audio. Is one of the things that keeps coming up for me is you've mentioned a few times that a lot of your fuel, for better or for worse, has been guilt, and it's come through your position from the past, your experiences from the past, and wanting to pay it backward as well as forward. And it just had me think about there's like a relationship between guilt, but there's also purpose, like being in your purpose, right? And really being aligned in that place. And sometimes when I'm coming from guilt, I sometimes also make decisions that are not in best alignment for me. Because I might overdo something or I might overgive something, but it might not be totally true to me or authentic because I'm coming from that place. So I wonder, how do you work with that? How aware are you of that, where you're really tapping into your fuel source and asking yourself that question, hey, is this like, am I overdoing something over here out of that place, or is it totally in alignment with my purpose? How do you check in with that out of curiosity? Yeah.
That's such an awesome question, Rick. I mean, it really is. And it gets to the core of some of the challenges I've had over the past few years. No one's going to, cry for me about being wealthy and some of the challenges of being wealthy. But there, just like being poor, there are challenges with being wealthy too, believe it or not. And coming into the vast amount of wealth I came into basically overnight, I didn't know how to be wealthy. And I didn't know that I needed to kind of set a core mission for myself that I aligned with so that I wasn't just given sporadically and so I've made those mistakes. I do feel bad. I have people from all over the world who I've known dating back to when I was 3 years old, literally, who call me and ask me for money, and I feel badly and I give them money, and my wife doesn't love that necessarily. So it's interesting. My wife and I, our source of trauma and drama in our household used to be about spending money and saving money and and all this other stuff. And now fast forward 15 years and now it's about giving money away. That's where the stress comes in. She doesn't love when someone comes out and says, hey, Pete, I'm short on cash. Can you help? She's like, where was this person for the last 10 years? They're not your friend.
Right.
And so that's been a really hard thing. I am still grappling with that every day because the anxiety of letting people down is probably the biggest anxiety that I live with today. I don't like letting people down. But how we've centered ourselves is through our foundation and coming up with a very mission-driven thing. So then when people come to us, we can easily point to this, and the woman who runs our foundation can point to it and she'd say, this is what we do. This is our core. We don't do this other stuff. Yeah. What we do at the Kadens Family Foundation is we ignite pathways out of poverty through quality access to education. Igniting pathways out of poverty through quality access to education. I recited it because I created it and we memorized it. That's what we do. And so when people come to me for an ask for Alzheimer's, a great cause, right? But it's not our cause. And I have to focus on things that I think I can make a real impact at scale. That's my best answer for you right now, but I am still developing as a human being on this front and still working on this, and it's hard.
I so appreciate that, and I love that we can talk about this because this is something that I've also explored in my life. And it's really hard to do the digging around this, the introspection around whatever actions I take. Is it coming from a healthy motive or a more unhealthy motive that might be coming from wounding of my past or my own sense of shame or embarrassment or whatever it could be. And so I've had to do some of that work, and I'm still, discerning that in some of my choices. Like, oh, is this decision or this relationship coming from which place inside me? and which fuel source? So that's where that question comes from, because it's something that I ask myself, and I appreciate that you're even asking that. That's incredible.
Thank you. That's a hard question. It's a hard thing to deal with. And again, no one's gonna weep for me for the situation I'm in, but there are challenges associated with it, and it does wear on me, to be honest with you.
Quick question about your. I've asked the listeners to ask questions from Facebook or YouTube or whatever it may be. So feel free to send your questions in now. Let's talk a little bit about your briefly, very briefly. You can reveal as much as you want. You have a family, of course. You briefly talked about your wife, which is amazing, and I can relate to that. That anxiety. I can relate to that pre-15 year, during, post situation as well. You have 3, I'm sure, beautiful children at different ages. What do you hope for them as a parent?
I always tell my wife this. In a different way, I tell my kids this too. I don't give a shit about your grades. I don't give a shit about your athletic prowess. What I give a shit about is how nice you are, how empathetic you are, how kind and kind of spirit and genuine of heart you are. And I mean that, because I say to my kids, if I get a call from a teacher that you're struggling with math or you're not applying yourself, I might be a little bit upset. We'll work through it though. And we'll get to the bottom of it, and I'll get you the help you need if you do need help with your math. But if I ever get a call that you're not courteous to a classmate, you're not kind, you're a bully, that's an invitation to be moved out of this house, in my opinion. That is just totally unacceptable. And as parents, we all have to draw the line, and that is my firm, line with my kids. Being not kind. And sometimes you suffer when you're too kind. Sometimes people take advantage of you. And I've seen that already with my kids, and they're 10, 8, and 6. But that's our firm line. And that makes me proud as a parent, actually, to know that I've never gotten a phone call about my kids being anything but kind or courteous. In fact, most of the times I get calls that they are, in fact, overly kind and courteous. And as a rich guy, probably one of the richer guys in my community, the fact that my kids are open arms and welcoming and not don't seem put off by other people approaching them, and they're very approachable. That makes me a very proud daddy. So, we're doing what you as a parent, it's trial and error. You do the best you can. And so we're doing the best that we can with our kids, but we're prioritizing empathy and kindness above everything else.
Yeah. Beautiful.
I love it.
Beautiful.
Yeah. I wish that was more prevalent. Thank you for leading in that way for the next generations also. We do have a few questions popping up on Facebook, so I want to ask you these. One is, first of all, just such an incredibly inspiring story. Thank you for everything you're doing. This person on Facebook says, I've recently seen statistics about the massive good that can be accomplished in the world if the richest people just gave a tiny percentage of their wealth. What's your thoughts on your responsibility and other philanthropists in terms of courting greedy people away from the dark side, so to speak?
Yeah. And how about giving your wealth away while you're alive, not waiting until you're dead? Which seems to be sort of this thesis that erupted over the past 15 years. I'm going to give half my wealth away, but when I die, what's the fucking point of that? Don't you want to see the fruits of your labor when you're alive? See your impact today? So look, the only way I can answer this is I lead by example. I put my money where my mouth is. I tell people, not as a sort of badge of honor of how wealthy I am, but I will give away hundreds of millions of dollars in my lifetime. The minimum I will give away is $100 million in my lifetime. I'm about $40 million in, and I'm 43 years old, right? So my guess is I'm going to give away more than $100 million. I'm worth, I'm pretty open about this. This is Straight Talk Live. I'm worth, give or take, plus or minus 5%, depending on the day, call it $400 million. Okay. So my goal is, that I have to pay taxes on that, and illiquid investments and certain things. But my goal is can I give away 200 million? Can I give away 250? And so the only way I know to teach people is to show them and lead by example and talk about it, so they either feel ashamed or embarrassed or compelled to do the same thing I'm doing. So that's what I do.
Love it.
Fantastic.
Yes. Once again, I love how much you lead by example, and that's really the way to do it. You put your money where your mouth is, and your feet, and your voting, and your hands, and all the things.
Right.
A question from YouTube. What's your 101 on resilience? Any cheat tips you have on becoming more resilient in dealing with setbacks?
I lived for many years by a famous Japanese proverb, fall down 7 times, stand up 8. And that was my guiding light. As an entrepreneur, like, you don't have any choice. Yeah, I've won the war, but man, did I lose the battle many times along the way. Those battles were hard. And so, if you manifest your dream, I read the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill when I was 21, which is a book about 7 first-generation billionaires. And these people were a little bit obsessive compulsive too, so they weren't quite perfect, but they were so focused on manifesting their vision for themselves, and nothing would obfuscate that vision. Nothing would stand in their way. First of all, I'd say read the book Think and Grow Rich, which is an incredible book. It's not about greed, although the title but it's about, if you have a vision, you got to have a roadmap. You got to have directions. If you have a destination, you can't get there without this roadmap. And you got to be committed to that roadmap. And that's what I would say. It's just an overt commitment to believing something. If you don't believe you can achieve something, it will never happen. I always believed that this type of life would manifest for myself. I believed it in my core. I said it to myself every day. I had a statement of riches in my nightstand, in my desk drawer, and in my briefcase that I read several times a day. And it wasn't just about making money. It was also about giving money away, to be clear. But I believed it, and I read it, and I thought about it a lot. And then it happened for me. And that's how when you're in the valley, you kind of can, pick yourself up and kind of get back to the trough, get back to the peak, I should say. Sorry.
Yeah. Beautiful. We have another couple of, so someone asking us whether we can access this interview. Yes, of course. I think, Rick, you answered that. StraightTalk.live. Jump on the website. We have backlinks onto Spotify. This is an audio cast. It will be the video as well. We'll replay it. We'll show it again. Join our community, and you'll see it for free. And then there is, one more question that's come through, which is interesting. Maybe we'll close off with this and wish we had more time. Which is to do with, so classic question. So with everything you know now, in other words, with everything you know now and all of the experiences that you have, if you knew this 15 years ago, what would you have done differently, if at all?
I try to say to people that I don't live with regrets. There's lots of things that happened that I wish would have happened differently, but I don't live with regret, because I got to this point in my life by experiencing all these different things. Yeah. But truth be told, I wish I had been a little less cutthroat in my ascent, in my business ascent. Again, along my journey to create wealth, many people got slashed and burned. Many people got fired. Now, some of the people deserve to get fired, right? And you have to make those hard decisions as a business owner. But some of them didn't, and some of it was about my ascension, protecting myself and my privilege, and so they had to suffer. I wish I would have thought about that and thought about the duality of those issues a little bit differently on my ascent to wealth and success in business. And that's probably the biggest thing, Af. I think I would have understood wealth differently. Like Af, you touched on it earlier, but there's the traditional form of wealth that all of us think about, which is, bank account type of wealth. Mm-hmm. And then there's other permutations of wealth that we don't often consider or talk about. And as I told you, Af, last time we talked, I found myself to be exceedingly wealthy in my bank account after I retired, but exceedingly relationship poor. And the notion that I was relationship poor, my relationship with my elderly parents was strained. My relationship with my wife and 3 kids was strained. My relationship with the friends I had grown up, since 3 years old with was strained, because I was absent for them. I wasn't there for them. Arguably, you can make an argument that I made all the sacrifices and that's what created my wealth, but still, did I have to kind of ignore them or avoid them in the process? I'd like to believe that I didn't have to do that. And if I could go back and do something again, knowing what I know now, I'd say, I try to better balance, although the word balance is a little bit of a bullshit word, but I try to better balance my focus on relationship wealth and financial wealth if I had to do it again.
Nicely put. Thank you for being open and honest about it, because it's real, right? And we all know that. We, especially as entrepreneurs and business owners, we all know we do what we refer to as trade-offs, and sometimes, you know, the story that I get from people who've got a few more years of life experience to say, Af, you got a family, spend as long as you can with the family, like really, you know, really spend quality time with your wife and your kids and the people you love. And it sounds all obvious, right? Like it's in a textbook and, you know, Deepak Chopra stuff. But in reality, it's as simple as that. It's as simple as that.
It is.
So what an amazing conversation, Rick, with Pete. And Pete, what a cool guy you are. And we love your humility. We love that you talk straight. We love that you're doing good things for the planet, and you're not just, you know, marketing, the marketing aspects of what we see out there. And I think we will build a great friendship with you in whatever you end up doing in the future. We'd like to support it personally and professionally, and with STL, with Straight Talk Live. You know, I'm deeply grateful.
Thank you. Feelings mutual, Af and Rick. Thank you so much for having me. You know, the ability to come on and have an authentic discussion and to throw out a few F-bombs too. That was a lot of fun. So I really
fucking great.
Yeah. It is.
So Pete, no, thank you for your sincerity, your genuineness, and really quick, where can people find you and your work? Where should they go on social media and or any URL you want to throw out there?
Yeah, sure. I'm on LinkedIn. If people want to connect with me, I don't actually use any other form of social media. Learned that the hard way over the years. You're going to stay up those other forums and spend less time focusing on other people and more time focusing on my family and my impact on the world. But really on LinkedIn is the way. I don't have my family office doesn't have a website or anything, but hope-toledo.org and hopechicago.org are my two big charitable endeavors if people want to look us up there.
Okay, great. And for all those out there, we'll be putting Pete on our speakers page. And so Pete, we'd love to get any of the links that you want us to promote for you on there as well. So they can go to straighttalk.live, and that's also where you can find any more information about Pete and the amazing work that he's up to. So Pete, thank you so much for being part of our Straight Talk Live, and can't wait to see how we converge in the future here.
Awesome. Thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Okay. Be well, everyone.